I know you're not here for small talk. Let's get down to brass tacks. So, May, how's my son doing?
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man Episode 9 and Episode 10 finale video. It's the season finale. They just aired the last 2 episodes together, but they have renewed the show for Season 2. They've already been working on episodes, and they just renewed it for Season 3. There's a bunch of Easter eggs, and we have a pretty good idea of some of the major arcs they're going to be adapting for Season 2, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. Biggest surprise cameo scene was probably Josh Keaton. Did not expect Spectacular Spider-Man to cameo in the way that he did. The Episode 9 title was Hero or Menace, a reference to J. Jonah Jameson and the things that he would write in the Daily Bugle about Spider-Man. It's also a sly reference to the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, which also used this exact headline during those movies. Maybe they'll try for a J.K. Simmons cameo in Season 2 as J. Jonah Jameson, or maybe they'll just use a different actor to play the character. It just felt weird that they didn't include him during Season 1. But we did get Daily Bugle references. This time during the title, they add the new card of the intro, the Scorpion in his new comic book suit with the pieces of his destroyed Oscorp suit, and he's in the upper left-hand corner in that old suit. They start the episode with Dr. Octopus reading the actual text of the Sokovia Accords. I don't think we've actually read through those, but I think there's copies of it you can read online, or portions of it that you can read online. He knows that only 117 countries are recognizing them, meaning that there are places around the world where they're not valid, like Madripoor probably doesn't recognize the Accords because it's a super shady place where a bunch of criminals hang out. Norman Osborn comes to visit him, gloating, rubbing his face and everything, and it sounds like they split back in the day under really tense circumstances. The way that Norman Osborn tells it, he remembers the exact insults that Dr. Octopus gave him when he originally quit Oscorp when they were younger. Iron Man is in the news for arresting him. Norman Osborn also implies that he also kind of hates Iron Man, like both of them hate Iron Man for separate reasons, but probably Norman Osborn just because Tony Stark would be a competitor of his. He reveals he's taking all of Dr. Octopus's weapons and armor that he developed and is going to try and repurpose them as Oscorp tech. Makes sense. Eventually this will all probably culminate in him building his own Green Goblin suit, the glider, basically all the different tech that he would need to be Green Goblin from all the stuff that he steals. That being said, there is no mention or reference to actual Green Goblin or Norman Osborn Green Goblin during the finale. That sounds like they're going to save that for maybe like a Season 2 teaser into like Season 3, and they'll probably just leave him as the final boss of the series, however many seasons it winds up running. All because that Symbiote teaser at the end of the finale makes me feel like Season 2 is going to be a Symbiote Saga arc. Dr. Octopus declares war on Norman Osborn, sort of setting up that battle for Season 2 as well. Tombstone's gang tries to rob the Oscorp truck to steal some of those weapons that they can kill Scorpion with. He also mentions Iron Man, saying that they'll have more weapons than Stark, because Stark Industries is still a weapons manufacturer. Nico hangs out with Pearl, sort of setting up their friendship during Season 2. Pearl is like the only friend amongst all of them that is not on Team Spider-Man now, so maybe that will change in Season 2. The Bluefin Breakdown Spring 2016 bus ad is from earlier episodes. It's just meant to be a parody of Red Dead Redemption 2. Captain America Civil War also came out in 2016 when the Sokovia Accords were ratified in the MCU, when they're being ratified here too. So you can kind of say that it's 2016 in this universe right now. She listens to Peter's apology on the phone and then uses her amulet to try and save herself from the crash with a little help from Spider-Man in his shiny new classic comic book suit. The way they visualize the Spider-Man suit reveal too is pretty cool. Like they start with the reflection of him in her amulet. The amulet didn't summon him or anything like that. He just swung in the nick of time. It was just a coincidence. But based on the way her arc plays out through the next couple episodes in the finale, she clearly knows how to use magic, so she knows that the amulet is magic, just like the comics. My assumption is this is going to wind up being a big Season 2 arc for her where Peter learns her secret, because they sort of play it that way, a bit of a reversal after the episode where she forgives him, but they're like, no more secrets, and then she's like, yeah, ha, no more secrets, but then stares at her amulet and uses magic at the end of the finale. So that being said, she's way less sympathetic now because she had this own secret of hers that she wasn't telling to Peter while she was pissed off that he didn't tell her his secret. That whole arc with her being upset with him would have made a little more sense. She would have been a little more sympathetic if she hadn't realized that she had magic powers yet. She does a little web slinging with him. They use her as sort of a parallel for Mary Jane during the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies too. does some classic Spider-Man quipping with Tombstone's gang, starts taking them out, pausing when he sees Lonnie, trying to figure out what's going on here, but this whole event winds up being them versus the Scorpion and his true origin as comic book Tombstone. And for those of you asking if they'd ever try to do Spidey sense on the show, they finally do it here, where he senses Scorpion coming in his full comic book gear, now wearing the helmet with it too. They had their big street fight, again, this is like round 2, but this was actually in the trailers with them fighting in the middle of the street. Spider-Man has an anxiety PTSD flashback causing him to hesitate, but manages to save Dawn, and this is mostly just to set up Tombstone's origin story where they reveal his comic book powers. Dawn winds up completely bailing on them, being super scared, and the big twist here from the comics is also that Tombstone winds up running the local gangs, and Dawn from the comics, or the comic book character he's based on, winds up working under Tombstone, so maybe he'll come back during season 2, like he'll slink back and become one of his underlings. Lonnie takes charge, working on securing the Oscorp truck, but then gets that comic book Tombstone origin story with the powers. It's Diox 3 that he gets dosed with, just like he did in the original comics, giving him enhanced strength, faster reflexes. It makes his skin nearly impervious to most weapons like bullets, giant scorpion stingers. He's also resistant to really hot temperatures and electricity, and claims his skin is as hard as diamond. Later at the end of the finale, you also see his skin starting to look white like it is in the comics. He'll probably look entirely white, like he'll look much more like comic book Tombstone by season 2. They use the rest of the fight to show you all of his different new Tombstone powers. First, the Stinger isn't able to penetrate his skin. Then he's able to throw Spider-Man around super fast to help him take down Scorpion, and he's able to survive the giant fall from all the beams. And based on the way they end things here with the Scorpion takedown, it seems like he and Tombstone are total bros, but I think part of the idea is that eventually they will come to odds because he's running a gang, they're going to be doing a bunch of illegal stuff, so Spider-Man will eventually try to capture them. So at least the way they're playing it, Lonnie is meant to be his version of a Winter Soldier type of character, like his version of Bucky, the friend that he wants to save, but who's doing a bunch of really bad stuff. For a brief second, though, during the Scorpion fight, Spider-Man goes super dark when he thinks that Lonnie is dead, listening to a lot of the advice or remembering Norman Osborn's advice about great respect and great power, which is a really cool twist on the classic phrase. I also think because of the big symbiote reveal at the end of the season, they're using this for Symbiote Saga setup where you see something happen similar to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, where he almost goes super dark, almost kills a bunch of people when he gets that symbiote. When Tombstone stops him from killing Scorpion, it also felt like a comp to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man stopping Tom Holland from doing the same thing to Norman Osborn in No Way Home. There are a lot of Spider-Man movie references throughout these last 2 episodes. Nico punching him when he shows up upside down because she's surprised also feels like a twist on the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man and Mary Jane kiss with the roles reversed. Back at home, Peter and Aunt May watch the Marvel version of The Bachelor, and when Norman Osborn says he wants 100 Spider-Men, that's to set up the spider that he's trying to create to clone Spider-Man's abilities to make 100 other actual Spider-Man people. It gets way crazier with the whole bootstrap paradox of Peter's Spider-Bite origin later in the episodes, but you could also look at this as a reference to the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man origin story where the spiders came from Oscorp. His team starts testing out all of Dr. Octopus's weapons and armor, the Green Goblin glider gets better, the energy source Peter was working on with Dr. Connors is coming along. He's also using Peter's blood, like I said, to clone Spider-Man, basically. They say clone his DNA structure, but they're basically trying to replicate his abilities, but you get the reference. And during the end credits for this episode, they add the scenes with the Scorpion fight, Lonnie getting his Tombstone comic book origin story and his powers, and another scene when Dr. Octopus was giving Scorpion his suit from the comics and Spider-Man's new suit. Episode 10 was titled If This Be My Destiny, which is a direct reference to the arc from the classic comics, also known as the Master Planner Saga, Amazing Spider-Man issues 31 to 33, featuring the panel, basically the vibe that they used for this reference in Spider-Man Homecoming, where he got stuck under the rubble. This gets referenced all the time. Even if you haven't read those original comic books or that original arc, you've probably seen these comic book panels somewhere. During that storyline, Spider-Man faces someone called the Master Planner who winds up being Dr. Octopus and has a serum to cure Aunt May that he uses on her after defeating him. The line, "This be my destiny," is a reference to his first day at Empire State University as a student. And because of the whole bootstrap paradox, time stone, infinity stone references in this episode, it feels like it's a reference back to his first day at Midtown High when he got the spider bite in the first place. There's going to be a whole lot of questions about that. Anytime you involve time travel and bootstrap paradoxes, you start to wonder, like, what does Loki think about this? What is God Loki going to do about this? During this new intro scene, they show him web slinging on the cover like the comics with him in the new suit in the upper left-hand corner too. They start at high school, the football team lost because they didn't have Lonnie, of course. Nico, now on Team Spider-Man, covers for him in class. Pearl not quite on the team yet, like I said, might be on the team in Season 2. She'll probably eventually learn the secret. He's busy helping people around town who got a bunch of their cars stolen from people from Scorpion's gang that did not get arrested by the police last time. Harry coins the term Spider-Manning as if it's a verb, like you're out Spider-Manning. When Peter barely makes it to class on time, they use it for a big reveal joke, so the super quiet person in their group winds up being a secret genius just like Peter and winning them the A- grade. They continue the grades joke with Amadeus Cho bragging about his 5.0. He seems like a real butthole on this show, and going into Season 2 because he stays at Oscorp, sounds like he will continue to be a huge butthole. Norman Osborn reveals Project Monolith, which is basically the combination of everybody's different secret projects they were working on, Amadeus Cho claiming that he figured out what they were all really working on along the way. And basically, it's an artificial Bifrost. Norman Osborn claims that he got the idea after watching Thor arrive in New Mexico during the events of the first Thor movie, with the Bifrost there, and the Avengers during the events of that movie in the Battle of New York using the portal the Space Stone opened, and watching the portal that Doctor Strange opened with the symbiote creature. Basically, anytime Norman Osborn opens up the news or opens up a browser reading news online, he gets an idea to build some crazy technology based on it. So it sounds like he's basically trying to replicate the powers and abilities of all superheroes that show up on planet Earth. But he gets crazy when he starts talking about how excited he is for this, basically likening himself to a god like Odin in Thor. Like, he thinks of himself as a god, which sounds like a very Norman Osborn thing to do, also making it sound like he wants to strip mine the universe, like call it the harvest, but that does not sound good. They test out the coordinates that they believe will lead to a barren part of space for a portal, but it winds up being the place that the symbiotes came from. It winds up being, too, a place where a bunch of symbiotes are living. Doctor Strange opens a giant sling ring portal before they can fire it up to tell him to stop because he's seen the future, like he knows what's going to happen, and this is going to be a terrible idea, like, no, don't open this. When he mentions the Sorcerers of the World, that's another Sorcerer Supreme nod, and Greenwich Village is where the Sanctum Sanctorum is located. Norman Osborn absolutely loses it on him. Maybe the idea is that his wife died at Midtown High in the accident and that's why he's so mad. It just seems like he really gets pissed off at Doctor Strange without a whole lot of reason. He makes a 21 Jump Street reference, and the reason why Doctor Strange keeps telling Norman Osborn that he did nothing at Midtown High is because of the whole bootstrap paradox of it all. He hasn't been to Midtown High yet because of what happens with the Time Stone. So even though they know about the accident, Doctor Strange doesn't know anything about it yet. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Norman Osborn doesn't understand what the Time Stone is or the whole time travel of it all, but if he does learn about it, he would also probably try and recreate those powers too. Whatever you do, don't let Norman Osborn find out that there is a Time Stone that he could potentially get his hands on. When they fire the portal up, the energy that comes from it initially looks like the Kirby Crackle, which is very Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse, across the Spider-Verse. They use that a lot when they open up the multiverse portals during that, but those are multiverse portals. This is just meant to be a regular Bifrost type of portal through this one universe. The same symbiote from episode 1 steps through the portal, and then Peter starts helping Doctor Strange try to stop it. You clock that the special spider that they created using Peter's blood escapes. That's the same spider that gave him the spider bite. So here's where we start to get to the whole bootstrap paradox of it all, where he basically got powers because he already had powers, and Norman Osborn tried to clone those powers, and the spider that had those clone powers bit him originally, turning him into Spider-Man in the first place. So future Peter winds up being the reason why Peter in the past got Spider-Man powers. While they're having the big fight here, he mentions the Dark Dimension, which Dormammu rules over currently. That's where Clea took MCU Doctor Strange in the post-credits from Multiverse of Madness. Peter also goes on a little trip through space and time through the Dark Dimension briefly. So Peter can now say that he has been to another dimension. Doctor Strange starts using the Time Stone, and then the symbiote tries to steal it, and it causes them to fall back in time to that same event from episode 1, basically creating the circumstances where Peter winds up getting that spider bite and getting Spider-Man powers. So here's the Loki Season 1, Season 2 question. If it's a bootstrap paradox situation, there had to be an original timeline where things went down differently, but then something wound up happening, Doctor Strange goes back in time and creates this scenario where Peter winds up basically looping his origin story like this. My assumption is this is basically like a Nexus event if you're making Loki references. Originally, this Peter wound up getting the spider bite in some completely different way, and Norman Osborn developed the spider in some different way. He winds up creating his portal in a completely different set of circumstances with different people helping him make it, and then something similar winds up happening where that spider escapes, then bites him, he gets powers, but then at some point through the Time Stone, Doctor Strange winds up causing this as a Nexus event, and like this becomes the Nexus event where it becomes his bootstrap paradox. When it comes to time travel, you can drive yourself crazy trying to figure out the logic of it. I am sure the showrunner and the people that worked on the show will be talking about this later, like, okay, this is exactly how we meant for this to go down. For instance, though, if Peter were to squash that spider in this scene here before it fell through the portal, he would not erase himself from existence because with MCU time travel, you don't change your own past, you only create alternate futures. So this Peter fighting here with Doctor Strange would continue to live, continue to be Spider-Man, but back here at Midtown High, there'd be like another branch timeline that he would have created where this version of Peter just becomes a completely alternate reality Peter. But they basically use this entire scene to show you what happened to Doctor Strange after the events of episode 1 when we didn't see him again. Like he basically just pulled the symbiote back in and they threw it back through the portal with a whole bunch of other symbiotes. When they form the super large symbiote, it also feels like a comp to Venom the Last Dance when the symbiote goes super size. But then, setting up our symbiote saga in Season 2, a piece of the symbiote, like a very tiny piece, winds up making it through the portal and staying that Norman Osborn then later finds with a big, like definitely gonna study that in Season 2. Doesn't it feel a little bit like Spider-Man PS4 where Norman Osborn has a version of the symbiote? Also the whole relationship between Dr. Octopus and Norman Osborn being really fractious, a lot like Spider-Man PS4 and the way that game went down. There's a whole bunch of social media posts in Harry's feed yelling at Oscorp or making fun memeing his father. Peter says he doesn't trust Norman Osborn anymore, and Nico gives them the idea to start their own company using Harry's money and a bunch of other really smart people and some of their friends. They wind up naming the company Web for Spider-Man references, and it's an acronym meaning Worldwide Engineering Brigade, and if you've been to Disneyland or Disney World, this is actually a big Easter egg for real-life Disneyland stuff. The Web organization is part of the storyline Web Slingers, A Spider-Man Adventure, the big Spider-Man ride that they built at Disneyland and Disney World a long time ago. Tom Holland filmed a bunch of new material for it. Doctor Strange then explains everything to Peter, revealing his identity to him as well too, even without taking his mask off, like I was that kid right there. He also leaves telling him that he will not tell him his future, but it sounds like they'll continue to run into each other in Season 2 and Season 3, like Doctor Strange will eventually be back. When he portals away, notice that you see the Watcher in the sky watching Peter, and he only shows up when something really WTF is about to happen, so this is probably not a good thing that he's showing up to watch this happen. Then when Harry is trying to send out email invites to get a whole bunch of people to join their company, there are a bunch of Easter eggs here on their list. They try to get Amadeus Cho, Asha, and Jean from Oscorp, basically everybody that was part of that internship. Pretty much all of them say yes except for Amadeus Cho, who's going to stay at Oscorp because he is a bit of a butthole. Scott Forbes is actually one of the visual artists working on the crew of the show in real life. Some of these names are of real life people that actually work on the show. Max Dillon, of course you will recognize, is Electro, meaning we're going to get Electro in Season 2. Leanne Dufour is an art director who worked on the crew for the show. Ty Miranda is from the Wasp comics more recently, guessing she'll be on the show in Season 2. Emmy Choi might be a version of Susan Choi, who was part of the 1990s Spider-Man animated series. This Priya character is also from those same Wasp comics, guessing she's going to be a Season 2 character. Benjamin Anders is a character designer in real life who was part of the crew. Tony Sandoval, also an artist in real life. Ned Leeds, self-explanatory, it sounds like Ned Leeds is going to come to the show in Season 2. Tiberius Stone is a scientist from the Iron Man comics. Adam Rodney, I think, is a voice actor in real life. Kidden Nixon is an X-Men character from the comics. Ripley Ryan is the star character in the comics. She was also part of the Infinity Watch. She was on Kingpin's Thunderbolts team. Diane Jenkins is also from the Spider-Woman comics with Jessica Drew. I'm assuming the fictional characters, like the comic book characters, we will see in Season 2. Then we get the big reveal that Jean has been working with Daredevil this whole time as a vigilante. She's Finesse in the comics, and she's Taskmaster's daughter, and she reveals that she's the reason why Daredevil broke into Norman Osborn's office a couple episodes ago, because she was basically infiltrating the company for him. They're trying to help people. We get another cameo scene from Charlie Cox as his Daredevil. We're literally about to get Daredevil Born Again episodes really soon, too, in the MCU. She basically says that she's going to continue working with Daredevil, but infiltrate or work inside the web company to make sure that Peter's group doesn't do anything shady either. Lonnie then tells his mother that he's also joining that company. I'm assuming that Peter invited him to join the company. We will see what happens with that, because the way he makes it sound, he lies about getting his GED when he throws his Letterman jacket away, and it sounds like he's just going to be running his gang in Season 2. He says they're going to be looking for a new base, and he has an idea for their next big heist they're going to pull, and you see that his fingertips are starting to turn white like comic book Tombstone. Nico then uses her powers in her necklace and a spell from a book to try and summon her mother and actually speak to her from beyond the grave. It sounds like her mother is dead, because the way they talk about it, it's the person that you care about in the actual spell. My assumption is that in Season 2, she'll just wind up telling Peter about her powers, and there'll be some larger arc with her character, like something bigger going on that will require her powers. Maybe they'll get Doctor Strange involved with that too. Like anything magic-based, Doctor Strange usually has a hand in it in New York City. In prison, Dr. Octopus draws plans for an upgraded comic book harness with all of his arms. He was already pretty good with the arm. He's pretty handy with them during Season 1, so Season 2 just sounds like he'll be way more of a menace. But remember, his real thing is that he just wants to get revenge on Norman Osborn. He says his sole focus now was in getting Norman Osborn. In probably the biggest twist of the episode, heading into Season 2, they reveal that Peter's father, Richard Parker, is still alive and in prison for some reason. The whole connection here is that Aunt May is his younger sister. And it winds up being a huge cameo scene. You probably detected his voice is Josh Keaton, who did the voice of Spectacular Spider-Man back in the day. He literally just did a cameo scene as the Invincible Universe version of Spider-Man, or Invincible Multiverse. He seems very well adjusted, like he's none the worse for wear, however long he's been in prison here. It sounds like it's been many years, and it sounds like the reason why he is in prison is because some big plot went sideways a long time ago, and he just ran afoul of that. This feels like vibes of Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man backstory, where his father was part of this secret Oscorp plot, like he used to be a scientist working at Oscorp. Maybe there'll be some big connection between him and Norman Osborn that goes way back, just because they're setting up Norman Osborn as the ultimate big bad for whatever the final season winds up being, and he's seemingly connected to every major character and villain on the show. Like, good characters and bad characters have some tie back to Norman Osborn, so likely Richard Parker, his father, also has some connection with Norman Osborn. Now everybody's going to go back and watch Amazing Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man 2. There are a lot of deleted scenes during those movies where you find out that his father is still alive and just shows up at the grave at the end of that movie. We will never know. Maybe they'll pick that up in some future storyline when they bring Andrew Garfield back in the movies. Then at the very end of the episode, he web slings across the city in his new suit. We get another Clev cameo scene. There's been so much Clev in these episodes. Like, he's getting more play in these episodes than he ever did in the movies. When he runs and jumps off the building at the end here too, spinning around, it also feels like a Miles Morales move in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. During the end credits, they add scenes of the symbiote fight, Doctor Strange and Peter, Jean Foucault in her finesse costume with Daredevil from the comics. In general, it was a really solid series. Like I said, they've already started working on Season 2, and they just renewed it for Season 3, so it sounds like they're going to try and get episodes out as quickly as possible. We'll see what winds up going on with that. Still kind of bummed out that we're not going to get X-Men 97 Season 2 until next year. But if there's any other Easter eggs or references during the episodes that you spotted that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. Given the big Josh Keaton cameo scene that I was not expecting, hopefully they'll find a couple cool surprise cameos for Season 2. Really big reminder, Daredevil Born Again episodes in a couple weeks. There've already been a couple trailers that I've done videos for. Click here for those, and click here to learn about Henry Cavill coming back in the Marvel Universe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.